Hi, my name is Yuki Jackson. I am a poet, I'm an educator, and I'm also one of the judges for your upcoming Poetry Out Loud competition here in Florida. And I am super excited to be able to share in this event with all of you, especially in celebrating the love of poetry, which, as we know, we need more than ever, right? And how much we know poetry has the ability to really give voice to what can often be really difficult to make sense of in our world and in our lives. And so, the fact that you are taking on this endeavor, to be able to convey it through your life is just amazing. So thank you so much for doing that. So the purpose of this video today is I just wanted to share a brief overview and, hopefully some things that might be helpful in preparing for conveying your poem. And, I'm still learning myself, how to constantly improve myself, what I can apply to be able to deliver my poetry to the best of my ability. And what I'm finding is that more than anything, it's really a combination of three things. It's really in the unity between our mind, our body, and our spirit, in conveying a piece of writing. So I'm going to share my screen and just show you some of the tips. And so going into it, bringing poetry to life through mind, body, and spirit. So I know that Poetry Out Loud also has a lot of other useful resources and videos on their website. So definitely make sure to check that out as well. And so for that reason, there's already a lot of great practical tips that y'all have at your fingertips. So I just kind of wanted to shed light on the same subject, just through a little bit of a different angle through this component, right, of the mind, body, and spirit and the unity. So, first is the mind. And the mind part means basically doing a little bit of, not homework, as in, like something you have to turn in, obviously, but, more as just doing a little bit of research, just Google basically the poet whose work you're going to cover. This is really going to help you in terms of really immersing yourself in the mind and in the intention of that particular poet. And by doing that, you're going to be able to convey what they wrote on a different level, and it's really going to just like drive it further home within yourself as well. And so, for example, one resource that is available is if you go to the Poetry Foundation website. They have an extensive database of many poets, both from the past, but also a lot of living poets. So, for example, Danez Smith, who is a very powerful poet. So as you can see, they have some of their background. You can read about their life. You can delve into it even further. They also have links to their other poems. And so I think that's also helpful to not only, familiarize yourself with that one poem or poems that you're going to be delivering, but also in studying their other work, because by doing that, you're really going to get a more full sense of who this poet is, what their concerns are, and how they tend to express themselves in their writing. And so as you do this process of just delving into the poet and the poem further, I also recommend that you keep these kind of key questions in mind, just to help yourself out to connect more. And so, some of them include like, what do you think is the poet's motivation, right? So if it's a living poet or a poet in more of a modern times, there's a lot of times we have access to their interviews, whether through video or, written in a publication. So I would definitely look into that. So they may answer some of these questions themselves, but then sometimes with some poets, we may not have access to that information, right, of these specific questions. So in those cases, you're going to have to try to do your best to maybe fill in some of the gaps, right? Of just kind of based on what they tend to write about, or, how they wrote, what do you think their motivation might have been, right? And some of the other questions that you may want to keep in mind as well as you look into their background is, what was their process? What about the content of that particular poem resonates with you? And then another aspect that I think will really help you in terms of delivering the poem will also be really paying attention to the structure of the poem, right? So especially, for poets who, publish their work, we're intending for the words and the way that we place them on the page to be read many times, not always, but many times, to be read in the way that they occur on the page. So a lot of times, you'll see a line break, where one line's going into the next, or you'll see some spaces, all of the placement of the words on the page and paying attention to it. That'll also help you in emphasizing certain parts of the poem, or leaving spaces, silence, a pause where it's also needed. So now going into the body part of mind, body, and spirit of bringing a poem to life, or embodying your poem. I recently had the opportunity to attend a poetry fellowship. It was a series of workshops for poets of color from an organization called the Watering Hole, and it was incredible. One of the workshops we had was facilitated by this renowned spoken word poet named Ebony Stewart. And so Ebony gave a really comprehensive performance checklist to really sort of guide our preparation to embody the poem in a physical sense and in preparing. So some of these things include just really making sure you practice in different settings. So obviously the first place we're going to come to is the poem on the page itself. So, make sure that, you're definitely familiar with that part. So reading it out loud to yourself. You may also want to read it to somebody else, because that's going to also help you to get more comfortable with sharing it aloud. And then another, important part of being able to practice in the different settings physically is to be in an actual physical space where you're going to be delivering the poem, if possible. And then lastly is being able to practice using the virtual setup, right? So if you're using video or the equipment with the mic or the lighting, whatever it is, make sure you run through that and practice with it, before you're ready to go. Some other things on the performance checklist are, being able to just kind of really train yourself to be able to focus in the moment. It can be challenging, right? Especially in most settings, especially in public, where you may have to be able to go against the noise of what's happening around you. So that is one type of concentration to really try to hone in on in this process as you prepare. Another tip that she shared, which I hadn't really thought about myself before, was, she was encouraging that, even if, you want to get your outfit, your brand new clothes for this performance and you're excited about it, and that's great, but make sure that you at least wear those clothes once before, at least, for a little while, just so you have a sense of how they feel on your body, so that in that moment you're not wearing clothes that you've never worn and then feel uncomfortable, and you're just kind of like focusing more on your clothes, more than you are on the poem and being able to deliver it, right? And so another tip is to perform through the mess ups. So I think that's also, it's just sort of like a profound and vital life skill as well, right? Just like be able to, like, even if you slip up, you mess up, you're like, oh no, but just don't dwell on the mess up and just power through that, and continue, because most times, maybe 9 times out of 10, as long as you yourself don't dwell on the mess up and you just keep going, either the audience first may not even notice it, or even if they did notice it, they're gonna quickly forget it, right? Because you're not sitting with it, and you're continuing to still, do the rest of your poem to the best of your ability. Um, and then another important point is that, in order to be, delivering the passion or the intensity in many of these poems, you don't necessarily have to be loud, right? So there's still a way that you can project your voice in a clear way, but without it having to be overly dramatic and shouting. So just something to, try to be conscious of. And so I want to share with you this example. This is someone I know, but I also am a fan of. He is a really, really powerful spoken word poet named Dennis Amadeus. He's from Tampa Bay, but he's traveled the country, performing his work. And, you'll really kind of notice his delivery. And that's why I'm using him as an example, is because he's so natural, when he is sharing his words. And so, even though there are, kind of heightened emphasis that he's placing in certain areas through the way he expresses himself, overall, it kind of just sounds like he's having a conversation with you. And so as you watch, it's just a few minutes, but, just kind of keep an eye out for, the way he's pacing himself through the poem. Also, take note of the way he projects his voice without shouting, and also the kind of body language that he uses, right? Where he is definitely using his face and his arms, especially to express himself, but again, without being overly dramatic.
Snapback hat, starter windbreaker jacket, black jeans with holes in them. I wore poverty like a fashion statement. Long before it was cool to wear hats with bent brims, or really tight t-shirts, or jeans with holes in them. And then suddenly somebody took notice, and now my childhood struggles are worn ironic by people who don't even know why it's ironic to begin with. Does that count as hipster? Is this cultural appropriation? Is poverty a culture now? Seems to be a lot cooler than it was in my day when you had to keep the sticker on your fitted cap to prove just how fresh you were. I never knew my fitted size, but at the time, snapbacks were much cheaper, but were blasphemy at the lunch table churches in high school. Condemned me to burns that damned my confidence. One of the biggest lessons I learned in this world is value the things you can't afford. 3 years ago, I moved into a house that I could afford, with 4 battleship roommates, all harboring a passion for changing the world around them. Thus, a concrete road was grown in the Seminole Heights neighborhood in Tampa, Florida, where everybody was always outside. The smell of barbecue crept over the fence like a nosy neighbor. The sound of trash talk accented curbside conversations. I used to just sit on my porch and watch a live canvas, swirling with the colors of loudness, struggle and resilience, love, splatter down a frame of broken homes, but streets were poverty like a fashion statement. Long before it was cool to blast rap music at 10 a.m. in Saturday morning coffee shops, or wear skinny jeans with holes in them, or rock cornrows in Vogue magazine. And then suddenly somebody took notice. And in just 2 years, I sat on this porch and watched a stronghold of 15 be washed away. Watched buildings once claimed by trees be reclaimed by banks. Watch people build up stores that do something good in a neighborhood they've never felt any of the bad. A neighborhood they only felt safe enough to enter after the police left, after native residents were moved out either in bags or in handcuffs. I didn't know you needed drug dogs to find a serial killer, a murderer who was a stain on this colorful canvas, so bleach was poured over the whole neighborhood, then deemed seminal, strong. How bold to name something after the people you killed to get it. Bold like a hunter's trophy. Bold like the victims of a serial killer's names brushed onto a wall only to be taken down right before election season. Just like the people that used to live here, forgotten, just like the families that actually lost those loved ones. As the trendy blood of appropriation continues to pump through a micro-brewed heart, bleeding a culture dry that it was too colorblind to recognize in the first place, I tried to ignore the remodelers painting the town white in front of my eyes like I did the kids making fun of my Skechers or the jeans I wore every day for a week. But now I sit on my porch and watch a neighborhood once filled with people who shared that same struggle turn into a neighborhood of people who choose to dress like that, who chose this place to live. And I hate that the worst part of it all is that I'm jealous. To see a community come together over the capture of a serial killer, but never over the suffering of its residents. And I miss the liveliness of a Friday night store session. I miss the laughter bellowing over the fence. I miss my friends in this humble corner of Tampa before it was a trend to kick out the ones living there in the first place. Hipster pilgrims turned founding fathers. Turn this is all's land into this land is our land. Turn the natives into a symbol of strength. Stamp that symbol onto snapbacks and windbreakers and jeans with the holes in them to be sold in Seminole Heights. Seminole, strong.
So again, you just kind of notice how the way that he presented himself in his body, in his voice, was all true to the poem itself. The personality of the poem, he wasn't really going against that. So, the same way that we can deliver a poem is through really knowing our own style, and having whatever we share be what matches the poem, right? And so it's also really challenging, or it can be challenging, to also be present and honest. um, Especially when we may be performing words that we didn't necessarily write ourselves, but there's just really something that can come through you, right? When you are present in that poem itself and connecting to the meaning behind it. And so, a couple strategies to kind of just help to, get us to the place where we can be that present, to where we're allowing the poem and the words and the meaning to inhabit us, is, some self care. Right. And so you could do some self care actions beforehand and then preparation, but also make sure to do it afterward, right? To take care of yourself. So some of the self care that you could do leading up to your performance, and even some of this you could do like the day of, or right before. For example, is like some deep breathing, some meditation. Doing some kind of an activity that you enjoy or a hobby, maybe something to just kind of like take your mind off of the performance, just to give your brain a minute to breathe and relax. And then that way, when you present, you will come with it in a more comfortable way. Some people also want to take a walk, do some physical exercise just to get some of the nervous energy out of your body as well. Or the converse, to also like try to get some energy flowing if you're kind of feeling low key at that moment. So just overall, just, doing different things, whatever it is for you, that just helps to really refresh your spirit. So this last part, speaking of spirit, is really, again, I know I've kind of like already mentioned before, but just really want to emphasize and leave on the note that at the end of the day, after like all of your preparation and, familiarizing yourself and embodying the poem and practicing, the most important part is to really connect, for you yourself, to connect to the heart and the spirit that is behind the words, right? And, just really allowing yourself to be almost like a vessel through which the poem is being delivered, right? Kind of like how life is itself, like a child even, so, letting that poem sit in you and then bring it to other people, right? Because, you connect with it. Again, there can be something that connects, with somebody else and may enliven their lives, or, and it just is also an exercise in really deepening your own connection, right, to the poem and, everything it stands for. So one way to really, strengthen this connection process within yourself is to really focus on why it is that you connect to the poem. Why did you pick the poem? What about it really resonates with you? So just some examples of some reasons that a poem might connect to a person might be, because that poem helps you feel less alone, or maybe it talks about some kind of a social justice issue that you're super passionate about. Maybe it tells a narrative that really resonates with you, or you haven't heard before and it speaks to you. Whatever it is, right? So it could be one of these reasons, or it can be a completely different reason. But whatever is the case, just really recommend that you meditate, and just really hone in on the why. This kind of reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, is by this dancer and choreographer named Deshawn. And this was on an episode of a show called My House, which documents the ballroom scene and voguing. And he's telling a group of dancers who are preparing for a performance. He says, people, a lot of people know how, right, but not everybody knows why. So I want you to focus on the why, because that's what's going to come through your body. That's what people are going to feel. And so I was just felt like that, you know mindset is just so relevant, to anything that we take on, but especially in being able to convey, words that came from such a, intimate place within a person, and that they're using in order to communicate, some ideas, and, hopefully be able to illuminate others, right? So these are some of the things, again, just to share some things that are helping me, that I'm learning from, continuing to learn from as a poet. And so hopefully at least one of the things that I shared may be helpful to you. And so looking forward to seeing all of you, and I hope to be able to see you in person also one day. All right, bye, thank you.